Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Retro Pop Planet. If you clicked on this video, you're either of my generation or you came here because you're a fan of Nirvana or Foo Fighters. But this is the video that I have been working on for months, probably all summer. I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, but I just really didn't know where to start actually. There's so many locations. So when Nirvana first broke through in the early 90s, massive airplay, MTV, the radio, nonstop. I think I first came across them on MTV, probably like a lot of other people. It was hard not to just be a massive fan from the get-go. The music was unlike anything that was on the radio at the time. The quote-unquote grunge sound really had filled that void between 80s glam rock, a lot of that soft kind of rock, dad rock that we were getting force-fed on a lot of even the pop and rock stations. So when Nirvana first came on the scene, it really was like a wrecking ball to the entire music industry. Whether or not you referred to it as that Seattle grunge sound, that's all we really knew it as. There really wasn't a ton of information about the artists. Nirvana, the big focus obviously was on Kurt Cobain, and we really didn't have a big inclination about who those other guys were, you know, Chris and Dave Grohl. And it wasn't for years until I realized Dave Grohl grew up about 8 minutes from my house. All of these quote-unquote grunge acts, I know that's sort of a outdated term, but a lot of these groups came from, you know, Sub Pop, which was based in Seattle area. So all of those surrounding areas where all these different local bands came out of, regardless of whether or not any of the actual band members were from that area. I actually started this video based off of a bunch of newspaper clippings and some old articles and even some current articles, but it's so weird having to do so much research for a huge cultural icon. I mean, regardless of what generation you are, you've probably heard of Dave Grohl. He's very much crossed the lines of generations. You know, he started as a teenager and now he's playing with guys like Paul McCartney as well as his own band. There isn't a lot of information about cultural icons. You probably won't find anything about Dave Grohl at any of these schools. There are no plaques. There are no signs, there are no reference points. You have to dive deep on some of this stuff, and I thought this video would be the perfect place to do it. But one issue, I started this journey, like I said, off of a couple newspaper clippings, but the one thing that I discovered as I was recording some of my little clips at these sites is that Dave actually wrote a book in 2021, his personal memoirs. And this book, I tore through it. It's amazing, and it filled in the rest of the gaps that I needed to complete this video series. And of course, I'm talking about The Storyteller. This book, for a fan of Dave, is written by him, and it is an awesome, well-documented entire course of his life up until, of course, 2021. So I have so much video that I think I'm gonna make it 2 parts. I think what I'm gonna do is go up through high school. In video number 2, I'm gonna come back and do some of the later stuff. I'm eliminating DC. Maybe I'll do future videos in DC, but it's really, really tricky getting around. Just jumping in your car and going from place to place is not feasible. You really have to plan multiple sets of days, and I do not have the time for that right now. It's hard enough just going through all these different locations. I've tracked Dave through Springfield, where he grew up, to Arlington, to Alexandria, and all the points in between. So let's just dive into my first video of tracking the storyteller with Dave Grohl. All right, this is really awesome. This may just look like an elementary school to you, but it's not just any ordinary elementary school. This is North Springfield Elementary School. And of course, this is where Dave Grohl went to school, at least up until the 6th grade, and then he would have moved on to the middle school. And apologies for the noise, but the highway is literally right here on the other side of the tree line. It's got to be an incredibly loud school to go to. Now, according to a couple different articles I've read, he formed his very first band with his buddy in the 5th grade, Larry Hinkle, and the band's name was the H.G. Hancock Band. Also, according to the article, he had read somewhere that Leonard Skinner was named after the band's high school gym teacher. So just in a bit of humor, they named their band the H.G. Hancock Band after one of their teachers. As I'm filming, this comes on Sirius XM. Pretty funny. A couple years ago, the internet blew up when Bleacher Report released an article of famous people that played lacrosse when they were younger, and Dave Grohl was one of them. I guess it wasn't very well known that he had played lacrosse growing up, and in the article he was interviewed and he said his favorite position was goalie, and he played for BRYC, which is the Braddock Road Youth Club, and we're actually right on Braddock Road right here. There was a photo that was released in the article of one of his lacrosse teams when he was growing up. I did a little bit of super sleuthing, kind of off the beaten path. I wanted to include a little bit of information about that team. He very well could have played right up the road at Wakefield Rec Center. There are a bunch of fields there. But I have a feeling that photo was actually taken here at Howery Field. It's now a T-ball and Little League baseball field, and I'm gonna actually stay back over here a little bit because there are games going on. But when I was playing youth league football in 7th and 8th grade, I played for Springfield Youth Club. We actually played a couple games here at this park before they converted it all to baseball. There actually used to be one field, or maybe 1.5 fields, where BRYC football and lacrosse used to practice, and they had a side field where they actually would play games. I have a feeling that that photo that Bleacher Report posted might have been taken here, and I'm gonna run over and see if I can maybe grab a shot of where I think those guys were lined up. I don't know how long this sign has been here, but this might confirm my suspicion. Home of Braddock Road Youth Club. I played a couple games on this field, and you still have a goalpost out there which does not look like it's in use anymore. And this field is actually a baseball field now, but this was a field that was used for football and lacrosse. And back there could be one of the locations where that shot was taken. So I have a feeling, just based off of the foliage in that picture, it could either be along this tree line where the guys were lined up to take that shot, or over here facing the road. It could be along here as well. Over here, this field was always baseball, so I'm a little more skeptical that the photo took place over there. But if it did, it would obviously be along like one of these tree lines. You can see where the old field stopped because the grass actually changes into baseball, and because it's Little League, they don't need that much field. If you're watching this video now and you played here back in the day, let me know where you think those photos were. Were they Wakefield or were they right here at Howery Park? I found pushed back into the kudzu. These are old football sleds. Who knows how long they've been here for, but this is a lineman sled. That's pretty wild. Another piece of football equipment as well. There's a wild sign I never noticed. In May of 1967, 10 Fort Belvoir U.S. Army soldiers and engineers actually died here. They were on official duty. They were upgrading the athletic fields, and the light poles started to sway, and they were electrocuted. Pretty crazy. So, prove me wrong. Now, Now, to my knowledge, it's not mentioned at all, but this is Holmes Middle School. This is where Dave Grohl would have gone after North Springfield Elementary. He would have gone here for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade, and then he would have gone to the next school we're gonna go to, which is Thomas Jefferson High School. Hey guys, future me, let me break in here for a second. I filmed this part of the video before I read the book, and he references an entire chapter, his very first crush he met at Holmes Middle School. All right, back to the video. So as it turns out, my friend Fernando is a few years older than Dave Grohl, went to Holmes Middle School, and he says the exterior has been completely upgraded. This actually used to be a flat roofed building. We are now at Thomas Jefferson High School. You can see that the rotunda there looks a lot like Monticello, where Thomas Jefferson lived. Dave Grohl went to school here freshman year, was elected vice president of the freshman class, where he was most known for, during the morning announcements, playing Bad Brains and Circle Jerks over the loudspeaker, and got to become pretty popular just on that alone. Now, his mom was a teacher here his freshman year. He was struggling a lot with grades due to his weed use, and his mom made him transfer. The next 2 years, he went to Bishop Ireton, which is another school that we're gonna go to. But this is where he spent his freshman year. Now, this is no longer an ordinary high school. This is actually on the governor's list as a magnet school for smart kids. So you have to apply to get into school here now. But when Dave Grohl was here, it was just a regular high school. Now, this school has a lot of famous alumni, including Ravi Shankar, but it's also known for one individual NFL player, Scott Norwood.
Lingner will snap it. No good. All right, so it's nothing but.
School also holds a pretty strong memory for me as well, because the one time that I've been inside, I took my first SAT test here. Now just look at that list. What other school do you know that has a championship in forensics? That's crazy. This is the best spot I could get without actually going down there, but we are at the Huntington Metro Station, and it is cited that Dave Grohl, when he was at starting in the age 14, would go to this metro station, and this is how he would get downtown to see the punk rock shows in Washington, D.C. This is actually a pretty good location because you can see a lot of Alexandria from here. And if you know anything about this area, we're pretty close to Eisenhower Avenue. But when Dave would have been coming here for shows, all of this is new development. None of this existed, with maybe the exception of, I don't know, that building right there, maybe that building way off there, and of course the Masonic Temple, which is that building way out there. All of this here along Eisenhower Avenue is new. Got lucky, the metro is just rolling through. And these trains have not changed really since the 1980s, so. Now we're at Bishop Ireton High School in the city of Alexandria, a considerable ways away from Thomas Jefferson, where Dave went to high school his freshman year. He was forced to transfer here by his mom because his grades were so bad. So he came here for 2 years, and I believe he had to repeat his first year because the grades were so poor. Now, this is a private Catholic school. Now, we're a considerable ways from his mom's house, but apparently his dad lived local in an apartment, and Dave would get to school from there. The section I was just recording in front of was the newer section. I'm assuming this is a lot more what it would have looked like actually when Dave was attending here. This school does have uniform guidelines, so it's funny picturing a high school age punk rock Dave having to wear a coat, blazer, and tie. Now we are at the Lake Braddock Community Center in high school. Dave Grohl played a bunch of shows here. It's actually tucked back in a neighborhood. It's kind of hard to find. For the longest time, I didn't even know it was here, but it is actually the closest location of my house, as in this is the neighborhood of my rival high school. Now, there is a meeting in progress, so I don't think we're gonna be able to really see a whole lot of what's inside. I had a work thing here several years ago, and the community manager was actually showing me around the property, and we got talking about Dave Grohl. She said there's been a ton of remodeling since the 80s when Dave played here. So there really isn't that much that's recognizable anyway, but I will actually insert a video that I found on the internet of a show from like 1984, 1985 here. In high school, he played here as the drummer in bands such as Freak Baby, Mission Impossible, and Dane Bramage. Welcome to Annandale High School, home of the Adams. This is actually one of the oldest high schools in Northern Virginia. I believe it was built in 1954. It actually has a pretty long list of famous celebrities, including Dave Grohl. Now, I could have skipped this location entirely because, well, Dave Grohl only went here for part of senior year before famously dropping out to join the band Scream, moving to LA, and then the rest is history. The reason I wanted to come here is because it has a very long list of notable alumni, including Mark Hoppus of the band Blink-182. He went here only for a very short time. And Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, went to school here, I believe freshman and maybe part of sophomore year. I thought this was kind of funny, especially with so many rock star alumni. Now, there's really not a lot to say about Dave Grohl's time here because he really wasn't here all that much. From the concert that I attended back in the early 2000s to some of the stuff that I've read, he skipped a lot. And then this was just a little bit of his senior year. So there really isn't a whole lot to say about this particular place other than it's a just really cool old school that has that mid-century modern vibe to it. Annandale was in my conference in high school, and those 93 and 94 football losses still sting. So we are right outside the home that Dave Grohl grew up in with his mom and his sister, and where he lived when he dropped out of high school and joined the band Scream. And then he went off on tour, and again, the rest is history. And that's it, guys, the house that Dave Grohl grew up in and lived with his mom and his sister. All right, guys, welcome back. I had an absolute riot going through and finding these locations and then ending it with Dave's mother's house. Stick around for part 2. Hopefully it won't take me too long to get out, but again, I am swamped in videos, so I have a ton of stuff to get through, and I want to get through as much factual information as I can instead of just spitting it off the cuff while I'm actually on site at these locations. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please give it a like. It's taken me a long time to work on it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on part 2.